Hello, I'm Matt Brzezinski, Senior Director of Product Management here at ForgeRock. And today I want to talk to you about combating fraud with a hybrid identity and access management solution. So we think about what's going on in the industry today and what's the word of the day. There's a lot of things we could talk about. We could talk about COVID, we could talk about pandemic, we could talk about digital transformation. But today I want to talk to you about fraud. And the reason I want to talk to you about fraud is it's pretty well known that fraud generally follows periods of mass digital transformation. And in 2020, we experienced a huge amount of digital transformation. This was made apparent by Microsoft, who came out in one of their earnings calls last year and said they witnessed 2 years of digital transformation in just 2 months. So, what does that mean? Well, that means fraudsters are out there looking at how they can take advantage of organizations that transformed too fast without looking at all the security implications that came with that. So in 2020, in the latter part of 2020, Security Magazine came out and said the number of fraud attacks in Great Britain rose by 31% against businesses. And 53% of those attacks were through stolen credentials. And what that means is that organizations are out there using synthetic identities, trying to take over accounts in any way possible. And we all know one of the biggest ways people do that is through phishing. Google reported that there was a 350% increase in phishing attacks in 2020. Most of these were related to COVID, whether it was luring people to get information on COVID, whether it was about how do I get access to a furlough scheme? How do I get my vaccine? Whatever it is, the fraudsters are out there continuously leveraging COVID for these phishing attacks to try to gain access to users' credentials. Lastly, Malwarebytes reported within the first 3 months of the pandemic, 20% of companies it surveyed had been breached due to the remote workers working remotely. A lot of that comes down from, password hygiene or not understanding how security works, but it also comes from being on insecure networks. So everybody's working from their home network, and nowadays everybody has a lot of things connected to that network, whether that's a TV, a fridge, or a baby monitor. Do you expect those devices to have enterprise level security? No, they really don't. So now we have this situation where we have employees working from home, fraudsters trying to attack them. It just turns into a great environment for fraud. Oh, and who can forget the Zoom bombs? There you are having a great corporate conference call talking about your corporate secrets and your intellectual property, and boom, someone drops in the background of Zoom, dancing around, having a good time. Well, if they're out there showing you that they're there, what about the people you can't see? So that's all scary. But what happened in 2020 was cloud adoption became a business necessity more so than just a business enabler. Organizations have been looking at, cloud adoption to enable their business since 2016, 17, 18. These have been plans as to how they can, gradually move to the cloud, take on new technologies quickly, while maintaining, their intellectual property and the things they do to make money on-prem. But in 2020, as the workforce shifted completely to remote, organizations had to find ways for them to be able to share data, collaborate, and work together remotely as quickly as possible. If they didn't, they just wouldn't be able to continue to be in business and continue to excel through 2020. So what they did was they reached out to the cloud. They got these services as quickly as possible to give them to their employees to allow them to continue to work. And they had to be cloud services. Remember, everybody's working from home. You didn't even really have an IT staff that could go in and set up new machines, do installations, do configurations, things along those lines. They had to be able to do everything from home. So cloud adoption really became a business necessity in 2020. And that was great. Organizations were able to stay online, continue to do business, but unforeseen security issues arose from that. As these organizations were consuming cloud services so quickly, most of the time they didn't have time to integrate them into their legacy identity and access management solutions. So they created these identity silos. And identity silos are a huge security risk no matter how you look at it. They foster bad password hygiene. Users are going to use the same username and password across all the different applications that they're asked to log into. That's just standard human nature, so that they're not trying to figure out what their username and password is. And of course, the more identity silos you have, the more password silos you have, the higher chance you have of those becoming attacked via social identity, so that someone's password can be figured out. And then once it's figured out in one place, they can go try that at all the other different applications. So identity silos create that bad password hygiene. It also sets up a situation where you have disjointed security policies and you don't have a 360-degree view of what your users have access to. So you don't know what privileges they have in all these different identity silos. And lastly, you have limited multi-factor authentication capabilities. So each one of those cloud services might offer some sort of multi-factor authentication, but as you're trying to figure out how you do that for your workforce, you're looking at multiple different types. Maybe you're looking at biometrics one place, one-time password someplace else, and that becomes cumbersome and confusing for your employees as well. So you take all these together and add that disjointed security policy, so that as you detect threats and you want to prevent them, you have to apply that to multiple silos. You have a real issue of maintaining a really good security posture against all your applications. Secondly, the vanishing perimeter showed up. As I talked about, people coming in from their home network, it's not a trusted network. You don't know who's on that network. You don't know what's on that network. You don't know what those smart devices are allowing people to come in from. Not only that, but you're transmitting credentials in the clear or without being on a protected network, without a VPN. Those are all issues. The only good thing about all this is that your employees weren't working from the coffee shop, right? So that's at least the silver lining that we can take away from this. So that really drives people to say, I need to find a new identity and access management solution. And here's why you should look at the cloud for that, right? So the first thing you should do is a cloud identity and access management solution is going to have all the latest authentication protocols out there. And what that allows you to do is eliminate those identity silos. You can, clean up all the bad password hygiene. You can enforce strong password policies, and you can apply consistent policies across all your applications. So if you have an attack, if you have something along those lines, you just have to address the policy once, and it goes completely across your organization. Second of all, that gives you a 360-degree view of what people have access to. So you know the privileges and the entitlements they have in all your applications. And that's really important to make sure that no one to stop that insider threat. Secondly, you're going to have the modern authentication technologies delivered to you as quickly as possible. So now you can deploy whatever form of strong authentication you want across your organization, and that's going to apply to all your applications. So that's really going to increase your security stance, as well as make things easier for your employees. There's usernameless type of authentication out there through FIDO2 and WebAuthn. Most convenient and one of the most secure solutions out there. Next, you're going to leverage those automatic updates. Not only is it about making sure the security vulnerabilities are patched in time, whether they're found on the underlying infrastructure or in the application itself, but they're going to be patched real time. Also, you're going to get access to the latest and greatest context and security capabilities as soon as they're available. So you don't have to wait for an upgrade. You don't have to invest your own team into doing that. You're able to do that right away. And having all that context and having all those security policies and security capabilities enables you to implement zero trust, so that you're able to make sure that the person is who they want to be, who they claim to be every time they access an application. So those are all great reasons for security for identity and access management. But remember, it's the business people that give you the money. So here's some carrots for them. First, you can increase your speed of deploying applications and employee productivity by having the latest and greatest identity and access management solution. You can consume those cloud products and have them up and running within weeks as opposed to months, maybe even days for some of them, right? You can make sure people can reset their passwords without having to wait on the phone. That first day that everybody worked from remote, that they didn't remember their VPN password, or they didn't remember an application password or a single sign-on password, How long were people on the phone trying to get those passwords reset? Think about the down productivity there. And then lastly, it goes back to the automatic updates, but you can reduce your infrastructure cost and your internal staff costs. First of all, you don't have to have a staff patching all the machines or updating them or upgrading them, but you don't have to purchase new hardware. You don't have to purchase new virtual machine licenses or anything like that. So you can bring down that operating cost as well and focus that money on other areas that you want to address in your security policy. So what we saw with all this is at an Identity Live poll that we did last fall, 86% of our respondents said they were going to have a hybrid identity and access management solution for the next 3 to 5 years. And so that's really telling that they're looking at, this is how long it's going to take for them to migrate from on-prem to the cloud. And then when they're looking at a cloud solution, what they're looking for are a few key things. First, they're looking for a common architecture. So that way, when you apply a policy in one environment, you know it's going to take effect in the other environment. So you apply a policy in the cloud, it takes effect completely in your on-prem identity and access management solution. Another thing that's really important when you look at this is your data being under your control. You want complete tenant isolation. That way, no one else can get access to your data. You don't have any nosy neighbors. You don't have noisy neighbors that if they're processing a huge job, it impacts your performance. And you can make sure that if something catastrophic happens with your data isolated to your environment, it can be backed up and restored within an hour. That's really important. And lastly, one of the things you want to think about is predictable pricing. You want a solution that's going to allow you to consume the same types of identity and access management capabilities in the cloud as you can deploy on-prem for the same price. And what that does is that allows you to plan your migration at your own pace and not have to worry about paying multiple license fees to do that, which is really important. The other thing about predictable pricing is you want to pay that same price no matter how much your employees or customers interact with your identity and access management solution. So those are some of the keys. There's others on the slide. But what I want to do is I want to talk about the typical migration process. And so right now, what you're seeing is organizations have their on-prem single sign-on, and then what they have is all these SaaS applications that they brought on last year that they're still trying to get integrated, and they're sitting there with their identity silos, and they're being managed one-offs. And that's, as we talked about, a huge security issue and opens you up for fraud. So the first thing you want to do is you want to bring in your cloud-based identity and access management solution. Send your authentication to the cloud solution, have it pass the security policies and the authentication tokens down to on-prem, and people can gain access to all those applications. Then the second thing you do is you enable your cloud applications. So now they're being controlled by your cloud application as well as your on-prem applications. Now note, another thing you can do as your first step is enable those cloud applications with the cloud identity and access management solution. So you have the cloud solution managing your cloud apps, quickly get them under a security policy, have your on-prem managing on-prem apps, so they're on the security policy, and you put a gateway controller at the front to direct traffic to the right identity and access management solution based on the target application in the back end. So you can go either way there. But once you have your cloud apps enabled and your on-prem apps enabled and the two tied together, then you can add the latest in multi-factor authentication, you can add self-service capabilities. All these things are going to make it more secure and easier for your employees to access the solution. Then you get to this hybrid solution where now you have an on-prem single sign-on and you have a cloud single sign-on. They're working together in harmony. And now you can move those applications over to the cloud at your own pace, whether that's 6 months or 3 years. You can do that however long you need to do that, knowing that the solution is going to work together and you're going to have a cohesive security policy in your identity and access management solution. Last, you get rid of that on-prem solution when you're ready to, and everything runs from the cloud solution. So what are the key takeaways here? So the key takeaways are look for hybrid flexibility. Make sure you have a cloud that supports legacy and has the common architecture for what you have on-prem so that your policies are going to work everywhere you go. Secondly, you want to leverage that cloud security. Every cloud provider has its own team monitoring the environment 24/7, applying those security patches as soon as they come out. And then the other thing you want to make sure you look at from your cloud security is that they have full tenant isolation. Lastly, you want to take advantage of the cloud to deploy the latest technology. Those automatic updates provide instant access to the latest and greatest security solutions that are out there, authentication methods, access protocols, and nowadays it's all about context. So make sure you're leveraging those as well. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions you have later on in the program.
What's great about ForgeRock Identity Cloud? If you want to fortify a team that lacks identity expertise, we've got an answer for that. If you want to build new features rather than worry about cookies and macaroons, we've got an answer for that. And if you want to be agile, there is even an answer for that. Yup, there's an answer for just about anything that might be holding back your digital transformation. Only with the ForgeRock Identity Cloud.